So today we're going to have this conversation. I'm excited to have it about neighbor-loving service, the third of our 4 core values here at Fourth. And when I think about neighbor-loving service, I just think about when I was a youth. This was, for me, was the hardest one. Like neighbors, like who exactly am I supposed to love? Who exactly am I supposed to care for? And even as I got older, I still struggle with that. As being in a church, a lot of people, I have people at work, people that live in my neighborhood. It's funny because Jesus actually is asked the same exact question in the gospel. He's asked, who is the neighbor? Who is the neighbor I'm supposed to care for? So I think we could maybe start with there. Maybe like defining that, like who exactly is our neighbor would be a good place to start. Who wants to take that first?
I'm going to let Isaiah take
it.
Well, thank you. Well, who is my neighbor? My neighbor is someone who is very close to me. Maybe my colleague at work, someone in my neighborhood, the guy who is whose house is next to mine, or anyone I meet randomly sometime as I sit on a plane. The person sitting next to me, that is my neighbor. But today the whole concept of neighborhood takes on a new dimension. Our neighbors are both right outside of our doorsteps as well as across the globe. Whatever occurs in one part of the world ripple across the other, affecting us, affecting our neighbors and our interactions with them. And Christ calls us to love our neighbors.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's not just the people that I immediately see, but the neighbor. The call for that is far-reaching to the ends of the earth. Anything else you want to add to that, Todd?
I'd just say that anyone the Lord sovereignly, providentially enables us to get to know or to run into, even in the Good Samaritan, whoever crosses your path, we're to treat everyone as our neighbor. Because everyone's created in the image of God. So in one sense, yes, it's the person very near, and as Isaiah said, yes, it's those far away too, but it's those people with whom we have contact that we are called to serve and to love. Even in the case of the Good Samaritan, if they're, in that context, people that were looked down upon by the Jewish people, the Samaritans were. But even in that case, so Jesus uses this extreme case of the Samaritan is the one who treats the person like a neighbor, treats the person who's down and out like a neighbor. Yeah. Which, so for us, that I think whoever the Lord leads in our path, on the plane, your neighbor physically, your colleague, or someone you might meet on a missions trip,
right.
All and everything in between.
Yeah, I think so. That's very helpful. And even with that, it's kind of like the starting place. For us as Christians, for us as family of faith here at Fourth, why is this important also? Because we know exactly we're supposed to do that. We know this is a calling for not just those who are close to us in proximity, but for anyone we cross paths with. But why should us as a church family of faith respond to this call? Why is it a core value even?
I mean, I think Jesus has a lot to say about caring for others, serving others. He came not to be served, but to serve. And we're called to model that and to follow his example. So one, the commandments given there, the examples given in Christ. And he also has a lot to say about the poor, about caring for the needy. When we were first coming up with these 4 core values, there was some debate on whether or not we needed 4, or should we just have 3? Because when you think about neighbor-loving service, that's kind of an outward-facing direction. And when you think about kingdom-advancing multiplication, which is the 4th one, that is also an outward orientation. But we decided to have 2 in the end because to be more specific and to put an exclamation point on what each one is emphasizing. So in neighbor-loving service, we're thinking about caring for needs, serving the needs of others, serving our neighbors, getting to know our neighbors in our own neighborhoods, even if they don't have needs, but to be able to reach out to them, love them, serve them, and care for them. And that's distinct from and a stepping stone to the next one, which is kingdom advancing multiplication, which is much more explicitly evangelistic, declaring the gospel, sharing our faith with, sharing Christ with people. The 2 go hand in hand for sure, but this was an effort to try to really narrow down what we're talking about in each of these things. Because if we just talked about evangelism, if we just kept kingdom advancing and multiplication, and we thought local evangelism, global missions, we would miss this whole aspect of what we're called as disciples to do, and that is to care for those that are the least of these, care for our neighbors, reach out to our neighbors, minister to our neighbors, as a way of saying, why would you treat me like this? Because Christ is my Savior. He's changed me. He enables me to see you how He sees you, and calls me to love you like He loves you.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add to that? As I was saying?
Yeah. As disciples of Christ, we are called to love one another and to serve others. That is, serving is an aspect of who we are, as Pastor Todd already mentioned. Christ commands us to love the Lord our God with all our heart, all our soul, and all our mind, and then love our neighbors as ourselves. That is who we are. That is our identity. But out of that, there is this theological, biblical aspect of our call to love others. There is that brokenness. And as a result of brokenness, the world is filled with hatred. But then Christ counteracts that with what? A loving service. And that is part of who God is. God is love. Because He is love, He has called us to love and serve others.
It's interesting because the call to love neighbors, even in Matthew 5, Jesus says to love your enemies. So the call is, like you said, anyone we cross paths with, the Lord is calling us to live a life of discipleship that reflects the love that we have received from Him, and we are to go out and to do the same exact thing in return to particular people, no, all. And it's a very unique, I think, call for us as Christians. So I think this is awesome. One other question I do want to ask, though. So now that we know exactly, we're supposed to love our neighbors, we're supposed to do it well, love our neighbors, even if they look like Mr. Rogers. We're supposed to love them.
You wear it well.
I do. Okay, thank you. But what does it look like? Like, how do we? Because again, think of it, we have a big church. There's a lot of different situations at the church. There's a lot of circumstances. Like, how do we do this well as a community? I just think of, the family that maybe has little ones. They want to serve and love their neighbors, but how do they do that? Or if you think of maybe a young adult who wants to know how to do that, like, how do we do this as a family of faith together with all the different circumstances?
Yeah, there are many ways that we can do this. Anytime you think about neighbor or serving our neighbors, sometimes we think in terms of just going outside of the walls of the church and serving.
Right.
But that starts here, as we first of all build a relationship with others. But also, even as we go out to serve the people who are vulnerable in our community. In that context, we build even deeper relationship in two ways. One, with other members of our congregation. And there are many instances where we go out to serve with our partners.
Yeah.
And then in that context, we get to know even some of the fourth members. Recently, there are two young students or young girls who have started attending, or graduate students who have started attending our church. In the context of serving, I met them, got to build a deeper relationship with them. And in that context, they are looking for more opportunities to serve. And so that it helps us to build relationship with one another. But also, we have external partners as what is called Mission DMV. And so we partner with some of the organizations and Christian organizations in the district who are doing things, who are serving those who are on the margins of the society, such as the Afghan refugee resettlement, Samaritan Inns, which is a homeless shelter for those who are going through chemical dependency treatment. We have Central Union Mission, which is also a homeless shelter. We have Rockville Women's Center, which is for women who are struggling with pregnancy. We come alongside that ministry to offer that kind of support, and so also serve the needs in our community.
Mm-hmm.
And also recently we started a prison ministry in response to Christ's call to love those who are also in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And so these are the ways that we have attempted to answer Christ's call to us as a church to serve those in to serve and love our neighbors.
Before you chime in, I know you want to chime in,
Mm-hmm.
is that I can actually add a testimony to that, because even for my family and I, when we first came to Fourth, it's a big church. We want to meet everyone, but it's hard. And so what we did is we did actually go out to the serve day.
Yep.
And it was a great opportunity for my kids to be able to engage with members of the church who are going to know them. I mean, part of being part of the community is that these older saints will know your children. They will pray for them, and they'll be able to walk alongside them. And I can say from my own testimony that it's been a huge benefit, like a blessing for my family, to be part of a church that actually doesn't do it perfectly, but would attempt to be the hands and feet of Christ in the community. It's helpful for the younger generation to be able to see that the church cares about that. So I just want to add it to that, because I do think it does draw us to one another. Even in John, it says that if they will know that you love me, but how you love each other. And so I think we can see that in the way that we serve, that we can actually show our love for God and how we serve with one another. So
Yeah, I agree. I've seen many families and more relationships develop in the context of serving outside of the church. So we are building relationships in two ways. One, among members of Fourth, as well as connecting with those who live on the margins of society, but also supporting the organizations, ministries that are doing that. Even Young Lives, there's another story of some of the ladies that our church serve through Young Lives, who are in a way trying to give back to us by volunteering in another way. Or imagine those who struggle with to meet their daily food needs, and then our monthly food drive. That is not just a matter of serving. We are not a social work, but out of that we have noticed elements of transformation. Elements of transformation in the sense that there are people who are touched by Christ's love through the ministry of Fourth, through our monthly food and clothing drive. So, and in that context too, there is that relationship that is developed in two ways. One, among those who come to serve on Saturday morning, and then with our beneficiaries.
Awesome.
I always say that it's oftentimes easier for people to build community and build relationships, not just necessarily face-to-face over a cup of coffee. That's one way to do it. But another way to do it that's sometimes more comfortable and more fruitful to build relationships is to be shoulder to shoulder with someone and to be serving together for a common purpose, a common goal, to not even looking out for each other's needs, but together looking out for someone else's needs. There's some bond that happens here when our attention and our love and our service is directed towards someone or something else, but together. So it's building a bond in a way that over a meal it wouldn't happen. So it's an added layer. So it's a reciprocal blessing that we get in serving. It's more blessed to give than receive. It's more blessed to serve than to be served in the Christian life. I mean, it's the whole paradox of the gospel, turns everything on its head. And so that's the wonderful part about serving together and taking advantage of the many opportunities we have through Mission DMV with the various partners that we have. One thing that I'd like to just be clear on is it's easy in a church our size with all the programs we have, and let's just take Mission DMV with 5 or 6 partners that we've plugged in with, to say, well, there is a group of Fourth people that serve in Mission DMV. They don't do, or they serve in other places, but they serve there, and so we as a church, we got that done. Check the box. Just because we have the programs doesn't necessarily mean that all of us individually and us together collectively as a church are serving in the way God has called us to, just because our church has these programs that, let's say, 100, 150 people of the 1,200 people that we have participate in that.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, we also recognize that everyone's life has different circumstances and different stresses and strains and responsibilities that they have to take care of. That not everyone can do that.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no guilt or there's no no harm in that. But what we would like for people that can engage in that is to still be thinking along the lines, as a follower of Christ, how am I to serve my neighbor? Maybe I can't go down to Central Union Mission. I can't do the prison ministry because it's mostly men and I'm a woman, or I can't do Young Lives because I'm a man and it's mostly ministering to women, teenagers who've become pregnant. And so how do I do it? Well, you live in Rockville or you live in Gaithersburg. Do you know your neighbors?
Mm-hmm.
Do they, when they need something, their car jumped or their meal made because someone's sick, are you the first one they think to ask?
Mm-hmm.
So that's also a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think our core value of neighbor-loving service emphasizes our call as Christians to care for the least of these.
Mm-hmm.
But it also calls us to care for those who are actually our neighbors, and not just neighbors, but colleagues as well.
Mm-hmm.
Are we outwardly oriented towards serving other people's needs? Yes, in the poor and marginalized areas and people, but also in our everyday lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the core value is not about just doing these grand gestures. The holding the door is good, but it's more about like if God has shown compassion to you, mercy to you, then shouldn't the outpouring, the outflow of that mercy show up in ways to others? Mm-hmm. And it can be in small ways, it can be in great ways, but whatever it is, we can be thinking, thinking and praying about how we can serve, whatever situation we're in. What are the ways in which God can use us in a mighty way, even if it's in a small way? Mm-hmm. I think with that in mind, though, there is this question that naturally can bubble up of why do most of us, I'll raise my hand, why do most of us struggle to find opportunities to serve? Why do we struggle with seeking it out? What would you say is a struggle? And then maybe also, what are some encouragement you can offer for those who are like me, who struggle with that?
Mm-hmm. I will start with the encouragement aspect. It is very rewarding, and when you notice how people's lives are transformed through our ministry of service to our neighbors. Just about a week ago, I was talking to one of our leaders in the area of prison ministry, who during our February worship at the prison narrated how one of the prisoners was impacted by the songs that were sung during worship time. This individual, or after worship time, this individual came forward and narrated how this song reminded him of his mom's ministry. And from there, there was a moment for support. I don't want to go into details because of confidentiality. But anytime you notice the lives that are transformed, or an individual who was going through a very difficult time, and through the efforts of our food drive and food and clothing collection was helped, you can just imagine the reward you derive from that. So it's not so much about what we do, but experiencing how people's lives are transformed.
Yeah.
Or testimonies that I've read and I've seen through, as Pastor Todd mentioned, sometimes we think serving others must be through going to our partners and serving, but also praying for them.
Yeah.
And recently I received an email from one of our partners, Cornerstone Schools, of how prayer changed things for this particular family. It is just rewarding to see that happen. But then the challenges that we often face as, and this is not restricted to to our congregation here. But it's generally across the board when you think about why we people are not engaged in neighbor-loving services. And there are many problems. Sometimes it's just fear and of getting involved in areas that are generally known as they are bad, or sometimes we perceive urban ministry or events that relates to the urban community as being associated with violence. People are afraid of that. But also sometimes it's lack of awareness. Lack of awareness can be in two ways. There are people who don't necessarily know how to navigate our website. So they are not aware of the opportunities for service. Recently, someone sent an email to me after church or Save the Mission Day and said, "When was this event announced at all?" I said yes. And then he specifically made a request that next time you are aware this event is coming up, please let me know. Send me an email. I say, sure, I will send you an email. So it's lack of awareness, but also lack of awareness of the needs that are in our community. There are some people who kind of wonder why in our community here with someone will be homeless or be without food. But sometimes some of these problems are just very natural, and I let me explain what I mean by that. By where we live, someone who grew up in North Potomac, went to school, UMBC. There are people who might naturally not come in contact with the needs of the people in the urban core, and so that it takes an awareness. And so, but for some people, it's lack of interest. When you think of going to Columbia Heights, interacting with people in the shelter who are going through chemical dependency, good treatment, and the rest, that is not what people want to do. And so, because of this, there are all those we face a lot of problems in our effort to serve the people in the urban core.
I think this, just to piggyback on that, that's one of the reasons why we use partnerships. Because the thing we want to be very careful about doing is saying, well, we from Bethesda, Maryland, from Montgomery County, are going to poor, less fortunate places as kind of the saviors, the messiahs. We don't, frankly, generally speaking, across the board, we probably don't know what we're doing. So we need people that are the experts on the ground who do have these relationships that we don't go to teach them, we go to learn. And say, what do you want me to do? What do you need done? How can I plug in here without this kind of messiah complex, but literally with a humble attitude of learning and serving. And that is a huge blessing to meet someone of a different culture who lives only 5 miles down the street. And the cultures are quite different, is very eye-opening and very enriching to be able to have a fuller grasp of a better grasp of the brokenness of the world that expresses itself one way, maybe in Montgomery County, and in a very different way downtown or in the urban core. So, I think the partners in that way help us do that quite a bit.
That's good. Yeah, as a church, you come into the church, you don't know all the needs, but you're saying like part of it is being aware that there are needs, and then being in a community where you can go. And I think one thing that comes to mind is that serving also feels like there's like all of us have this unique gift, or we see things a little bit differently. And I think one of the benefits too, as you begin to serve, is you get to, I think the gifts that God has poured in you get to come out in these different ways. Like you get to see what God's doing in other people's lives, but also the gifts that you have, I think, can be showed off in the kingdom of God as you are serving God's people. The Lord is continuously like working on you and refining you, where these gifts are able to show in new ways that maybe they couldn't show, at work or in our day-to-day lives. So I think there's a unique opportunity to be part of what God is doing, and also be part of the refinement where God is working on you and changing and transforming you as you see other lives being transformed. So I think it would be anything else you want to add to this? Anything else where you want to say that would be helpful in this conversation? It's a conversation, but you all are preaching. That's the thing. Like the gospel's being preached, and I'm being convicted that we do. Got to look outside myself and see how I can be serving my brothers and sisters. But is there anything we can take away from this conversation?
I think one of the things that I appreciate so much, the way neighbor loving service is framed here, is to look at is that it aligns with who we are and what we profess. And there is, in this value, is the incarnational model. The incarnational model where Christ, who is God, came down from heaven to earth to serve us. And through our calling as disciples of Christ, we must extend the love of Christ to others. So it's not just anything that something that is outside of us, but this is the core of who we are as disciples of Christ. That we ought to love one another and serve one another. And this is not something which we do as a task, but we do it as a way of living out our Christianity. It doesn't mean if you don't go down to Central Union Missions or Cornerstone School, you are not a Christian. No, that's not what it means. But it means that this is who we are as Christians. I think that is the reason why this is our core value, neighbor loving service. And I like this approach because this is the incarnational model. Christ came, he touched us. He touched each one of us. That's the reason why we are here. He touched the earth and transformed the earth. And you can just pick any of our partners and read the stories of transformation through the people that they serve. And you can just understand the incarnational model, which is developed through these core values. And as we go out and serve others.
Wow. Man.
I'd like to say, too, when we're talking about the difference between kingdom advancing multiplication and neighbor-loving service, that there are two texts for those. Both happen and end up being in Matthew's Gospel. Matthew 25 is often called the Great Compassion, and that's where Jesus says, when you visited me in the prison, when you gave me a cup of water, when you gave me something to eat, and you gave me clothing for my back. And then the question is asked, when did we ever do that? He says, whenever you've done this for the least of these, you've done it for me. That's Matthew 25, the Great Compassion. That's what we're talking about in neighbor-loving service, primarily. In Matthew 28, we go from the Great Compassion to the Great Commission in Matthew 28 to make disciples of all nations, and so on. That's the core of our mission, is making disciples. And so to be able to have those two texts at the back of Matthew to anchor biblically why we're doing both and why we put a separation between the two of them, even though there's a lot of overlap, and one serves as a means to the end. When you serve someone, show them you care, they're more likely potentially to listen and to be open. What's the expression? People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Type of idea. A little cliche, but true.
Yeah. So these are great points. I feel like I'm encouraged now to leave this conversation and go and serve. I think it'll be great, maybe, Todd, if you just read the core value. That'd be helpful.
Yeah, if you go to the website, each of the core values has I think 3 bullet points under each of them, which kind of unpack what we mean when we say this. So this is what it says. Neighbor-loving service, the first bullet says, demonstrating compassion and mercy to all in need. That's that everyone's our neighbor type of aspect, all who are in need. Building relationships with our neighbors and being involved in our communities. That's less having to do with the caring for the least of these, but more just being outwardly focused on serving our neighbors and all those with whom we work and live among. And then the third bullet says partnering with other organizations that serve the needs of the poor and broken. And there's the whole notion of Mission DMV that sets up this system, this structure, to make it easier for our people to get involved in those places that they might not otherwise know how to get involved, to open the doorway for them to be involved in that kind of neighbor loving service amongst the marginalized.